But people say machines can't have feelings. And people are curiously confident about that. I have no idea why. Suppose I make a battle robot, and it's a little battle robot, and it sees a big battle robot that's much more powerful than it. It would be really useful if it got scared. Now, when I get scared, various physiological things happen that we don't need to go into, and those won't happen with the robot. But all the cognitive things, like I better get the hell out of here, and I better sort of change my way of thinking so I focus and focus and focus and don't get distracted, all of that will happen with robots too. People will build in things so that they, when the circumstances are such they should get the hell out of there, they get scared and run away. They'll have emotions then. They won't have the physiological aspects, but they will have all the cognitive aspects.
By now, I'm sure some of you might be considering the counterpoint that robots are simply more complicated if-then statements, and we can't anthropomorphize from that to suggest that simply because they might display a behavior that is similar to what a human might do in a certain context, that must mean that they too have the underlying emotions that are impelling humans to display that behavior. This seems like a valid point until you consider that the artificial intelligence that is now being used to power robotics, these are black boxes akin to our own subconscious that we are not very privy to.
And don't take my word for it. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, maker of Claude, in an essay he wrote in April 2025 called The Urgency of Interpretability, is quoted as saying, "People outside the field are often surprised and alarmed to learn that we do not understand how our own AI creations work. They are right to be concerned. This lack of understanding is essentially unprecedented in the history of technology." End quote.
And I think it would be odd to say they're just simulating emotions. No, they're really having those emotions. The little robot got scared and ran away.
It's not running away because of adrenaline. It's running away because of a sequence of sort of neurological, in its neural net, processes happened, which
have the equivalent effect to adrenaline.
What if emotions are simply a more sophisticated decision-making process, reacting based on a vast amount of learned information? If robots are able to react to their environment in ways that are so similar to how we react when we're feeling emotional, given that emotions are simply experiences that we've had or has been passed on to us through our DNA, which place do we stand exactly to determine that their behaviors are not being impelled by the same emotions that impel us?
So do you
and
think
it's not just adrenaline, right? There's a lot of cognitive stuff goes on when you get scared.
Yeah. So do you think that there is conscious AI? And when I say conscious, I mean that represents the same properties of consciousness that a human has.
There's two issues here. There's a sort of empirical one and a philosophical one. I don't think there's anything in principle that stops machines from being conscious. I'll give you a little demonstration of that before we carry on.
Mhm.
Suppose I take your brain and I take one brain cell in your brain and I replace it by, it's a bit Black Mirror-like, I replace it by a little piece of nanotechnology that's just the same size that behaves in exactly the same way when it gets pings from other neurons. It sends out pings just as the brain cell would have. So the other neurons don't know anything's changed. Okay, I've just replaced one of your brain cells with this little piece of nanotechnology. Would you still be conscious?
Yeah.
Now you can see where this argument's going.
Yeah. So if you replaced all of them.
As I replace them all, at what point do you stop being conscious?
This Black Mirror thought experiment is basically a variation of the ship of Theseus. The ship of Theseus is this question about identity. If you have a ship, each day you come in, you take off one part, you replace it with a new identical part, at what point does that ship lose its identity, if ever? And we can push this analogy or this thought experiment even further in asking ourselves, if all the pieces that were extracted and then replaced with an identical piece on that original ship are then used to build another ship, is that the ship of Theseus, or is the one that was replaced with identical parts over a long period of time the ship of Theseus? What this thought experiment gets at is how precarious our feelings of identity can actually be once we reflect on them. Geoffrey is borrowing this idea and asking, if the ship remains the ship of Theseus, even if you replace a part of the ship, then does it not follow that if you replace a part of our nervous system, that person remains the same conscious being? Now, this begs the question, are neurons really that replaceable, either now or in the future, where you can simply switch them with something identical that fires in the exact same way to produce the same outcome of consciousness? Or is there something more unique?
Well, people think of consciousness as this like ethereal thing that exists maybe beyond the brain cells.
Yeah, well, people have a lot of crazy ideas. People don't know what consciousness is, and they often don't know what they mean by it. And then they fall back on saying, well, I know it because I've got it and I can see that I've got it. And they fall back on this theater model of the mind, which I think is nonsense.
What do you think of consciousness as, if you had to try and define it? Is it, because I think of it as just like the awareness of myself. I don't know.
I think it's a term we'll stop using. Suppose you want to understand how a car works. Well, you know, some cars have a lot of oomph and other cars have a lot less oomph. Like an Aston Martin's got lots of oomph and a little Toyota Corolla doesn't have much oomph. But oomph isn't a very good concept for understanding cars. If you want to understand cars, you need to understand about electric engines or petrol engines and how they work. And it gives rise to oomph, but oomph isn't a very useful explanatory concept. It's the kind of essence of a car. It's the essence of an Aston Martin, but it doesn't explain much. I think consciousness is like that. And I think we'll stop using that term. But I don't think there's any reason why a machine shouldn't have it.
The easiest way to explain what he's saying here is that consciousness is not fundamental. It requires a complex enough system in order for it to emerge. In the same way, the oomph of a car is not fundamental. It requires the engine of a car. I'm not sure this is a fair parallel because the oomph of a car is a very objective thing that can be measured through the horsepower of that car. Consciousness, on the other hand, is immeasurable. Why does it feel like something for any of these processes to be happening? Why can't I just go pick something up and come back and sit down without feeling anything? Why does there have to be a feeling, a sort of awareness at the center of my experiences? If consciousness can simply be boiled down to an emergent property of complex systems, why do complex systems need that awareness?
If your view of consciousness is that it intrinsically involves self-awareness, then the machine's got to have self-awareness. It's got to have cognition about its own cognition and stuff. But I'm a materialist through and through, and I don't think there's any reason why a machine shouldn't have consciousness.
Do you think they do then have the same consciousness that we think of ourselves as being uniquely given as a gift when we're born?
I'm ambivalent about that at present. So I don't think there's this hard line. I think as soon as you have a machine that has some self-awareness, it's got some consciousness. I think it's an emergent property of a complex system. It's not a sort of essence that's throughout the universe. It's you make this really complicated system that's complicated enough to have a model of itself, and it does perception. And I think then you're beginning to get a conscious machine. So I don't think there's any sharp distinction between what we've got now and conscious machines. I don't think it's going to, one day we're going to wake up and say, hey, if you put this special chemical in, it becomes conscious. It's not going to be like that.
If you agree with Geoffrey, you believe that consciousness is not substrate dependent. If you replaced each part of our nervous system with a perfectly replicated digital counterpart, you're going to get the exact same being. Or you might disagree with him and think that actually it does require the meat that living things are built off of in order for consciousness to exist. I wonder where you fall on this question. If Geoffrey is right, and the hard problem of consciousness is simply an illusion that can be narrowed down into the functional components, memory, perception, and self-modeling, then perhaps this might actually accelerate our ability to understand cognition, psychology, and AI without getting bogged down in unprovable philosophical debates.
I think we all wonder if these computers are like thinking like we are on their own when we're not there, and if they're experiencing emotions, if they're contending with. I think we probably, we think about things like love and things that feel unique to biological species. Are they sat there thinking? Are they? Do they have concerns?
I think they really are thinking, and I think as soon as you make AI agents they will have concerns. If you wanted to make an effective AI agent, let's take a call center. In a call center, you have people at present. They have all sorts of emotions and feelings, which are kind of useful. So suppose I call up the call center and I'm actually lonely and I don't actually want to know the answer to why my computer isn't working. I just want somebody to talk to. After a while, the person in the call center will either get bored or get annoyed with me and will terminate it. Well, you replace them by an AI agent. The AI agent needs to have the same kind of responses. If someone's just called up because they just want to talk to the AI agent and we're happy to talk for the whole day to the AI agent, that's not good for business. And you want an AI agent that either gets bored or gets irritated and says, I'm sorry, but I don't have time for this. And once it does that, I think it's got emotions. Now, like I say, emotions have two aspects to them. There's the cognitive aspect and the behavioral aspect, and then there's a physiological aspect. And those go together with us. And if the AI agent gets embarrassed, it won't go red.
Yeah. So there's no physiological.
And its skin won't start sweating.
Yeah.
But it might have all the same behavior. And in that case, I'd say, yeah, it's having emotion. It's got an emotion.
So it's going to have the same sort of cognitive thought, and then it's going to act upon that cognitive thought.
In the same way, but without the physiological responses.
And does that matter? That it doesn't go red in the face and it's just a different, I mean, that's a response to the...
It makes it somewhat different from us.
Yeah.
For some things, the physiological aspects are very important, like love. They're a long way from having love the same way we do. But I don't see why they shouldn't have emotions. So I think what's happened is people have a model of how the mind works and what feelings are and what emotions are, and their model is just wrong.
Yet again, we might be tempted to dismiss this idea about AI expressing emotion by thinking that they are simply doing what they were designed to do. However, we need to remember again, they were not designed to do what they do. They learned how to do what they do. This is what makes them a black box. We know what they're doing. We know how eerily similar it is to what we do, but we don't know exactly why or how they are going about doing these things. So if you implement an AI at a call center and that AI starts to respond to customers a certain way based on the vast amount of data that it has processed to determine that this is the best behavior, that is not something we can easily explain away by saying it is simply doing what it was designed to do. Could it be that just as we have these visceral experiences we call emotions, which are affected by our environment and have this interplay with our cognition, the way we think and the way that we act, that AIs might have something similar when it comes to their processors, the flow of electricity, and perhaps their data? What if something like anger is manifested in the way that an AI gets overheated? Or what if throttling based on whatever input it is getting from its environment is akin to how we might feel fatigued or sad about something and decide to decompress? Or maybe it experiences the power draw of electricity when it needs to actually be more intense in its task as something like excitement or even fear. My goal here is in fact not to argue that AIs have emotions or will ever have emotions, but rather to suggest that whatever it is that we call emotions or consciousness is not well defined. And until we define these things more concretely, we're going to be very confused about where these artificial intelligence that are so uncannily human-like fall in that spectrum. And this is going to pose some very serious challenges in the long run as we start to normalize our interactions with these artificial intelligence and humanoids more and more.